Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Naturally Beautiful and Optimal Wellness Summit. My name is Elizabeth Engen. I am your host, and we are brought to you by Empower You, Jenny Halligan. And today we have an amazing guest. I love speaking with him and working with him. His name is Ari Whitten. He's an energy expert. He's written Forever Fat Loss, and he's created the Energy Blueprint System. Welcome, Ari.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Well, you're welcome. Everyone else here is going to be as excited to have you as I am, because energy is Ari is such an expert in his field. And Ari, can I ask you, what does optimal wellness mean to you?
You know, I actually want to paraphrase kind of a little bit of a hero of mine. His name is Dorian Paskowitz. And he's somebody who is kind of a legendary figure in the surfing realm, but he's a very, very interesting guy. And there's actually a documentary on him on Netflix. It's called Surfwise for anybody interested. But just a super interesting guy with kind of an amazing, remarkable life story. And he was a former medical doctor who ended up leaving the profession to kind of pursue some other things that he was interested in. And he said, health is a presence of a superior state of well-being, a vigor, a pizzazz, a vitality, of a pizzazz that you have to work for every single day of your life, not just the absence of disease. And I really like that definition that he came up with, because you know, so many people conceptualize health as just kind of, you don't have symptoms. You're not diseased, you're not ill, you're whatever, you know, kind of the default state is when you're not unwell. And he's saying, you know, it's actually something beyond that. It's something one step or a few steps above that. It's a superior state of vitality and living with passion and this pizzazz, as he calls it. And he also points out that it's something that you have to work for every single day of your life. It's not just a default state of not being sick. So I would go with him on that one. That's kind of my favorite definition of what it means to be optimally healthy.
That's awesome. And Ari, you teach a lot of people how to change their habits and what they do on a daily basis and really work for it. I know, I've personally done it with you. Are you a surfer yourself, Ari? Is that kind of what attracted you to him?
I am, yeah. I live in San Diego, not far from the beach. I actually get to see it from where I live, which is nice. And usually go down there every day, surf, or to spend time with my dog on the beach and my family. But yeah, I love the beach. I love being in the ocean, and whether it's just swimming or surfing or playing with the dog, it's a joy for me to be there.
So Ari, can you tell us, please, why do you feel like people are suffering from fatigue nowadays?
It's a great question, and you know, I think the first thing to point out is that that there is kind of an epidemic of fatigue that's happening right now, and more people every year are suffering from it. And you know, one thing that might be interesting for people to do is if you do a Google Trends search, which basically tells you how often people are searching for a given word or phrase within Google over the last, let's say, 15 years, what you'll see is rates of people searching for the term adrenal fatigue are skyrocketing. And tons and tons of people are searching for this term. Why? Well, because they're fatigued, of course, and they're trying to figure out why. And we have lots and lots of different theories that are out there as to why we're fatigued. You know, some people are saying it's all about the adrenals. Other people are saying it's all about the thyroid gland. Or people are saying it's all about inflammation, or it's all about this, it's all about that. There are lots of different proposed mechanisms and theories and ways of thinking about it. But I think the bottom line of what it really comes down to is we live in an environment, you know, the modern world has all kinds of factors in it that affect our energy in a negative way, or that lead to behaviors that lead to us behaving in a way where we're either doing too much of things that strip us of energy, or not enough of the things that are required to help our bodies make energy. And ultimately, fatigue is really an imbalance between energy generation and energy use. If you're, so there's kind of two sides of the equation that can go wrong here. One is your body's not making enough energy, and the other one is you're burning more than your body has the capacity to produce. So as an analogy, if you think of it like a bank account, it's basically the equivalent of somebody spending more money every month than they're making. And most of us are continually doing that when it comes to energy. We're spending a lot more than we're generating, and that's a big problem. It leads to energy bankruptcy over time. And you're basically working on borrowed energy in the form of caffeine and stimulants and sugar and things like that, instead of big reserve in your bank account, and then pulling out little bits here and there and that are easy for you to use that energy and still cope and have lots to spare.
Wow. So you talked about behaviors. Now, are those behaviors consuming caffeine or too much caffeine and sugar? Is that what you meant by that?
Well, that's just one or a couple examples. There are many, many, many examples. So as another example, circadian rhythm is another big part of energy regulation. So for those that don't know, circadian rhythm is our biological clock in the brain, and it's a specific part of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's not important that you remember the name, but basically it's important that we have this particular area of the brain that is in charge of regulating our wakefulness and sleep cycles. And like pretty much all other organisms, humans are wired with a 24-hour clock that tells us when to be awake, alert, and active and energetic, and when to go to sleep. So at the same time, I just want to point out for people, at the same time that this concept that I'm explaining right now might seem kind of odd or abstract, circadian rhythm, what the heck is this guy talking about, this part in the brain? Well, in more pragmatic terms, this is the reason that at night, and then you fall asleep for 8 or 9 hours or so every night, and then at a particular time in the morning, you wake up, and then you go about your day and you're awake during that time. This is the reason that happens, that those things actually take place, that you go to sleep and you wake up each night, each morning, and each evening. And it turns out that this circadian clock is really important for our energy levels. It's also important for our health. It's when it's disrupted, it predisposes to all kinds of different diseases. Dozens of different diseases have been linked to disruption of the circadian clock in the brain. It results in fatigue. So basically, the way that this connects to our modern world is that the circadian clock functions based on input of light primarily. So it's actually the light signal from the environment, so sunlight, that feeds into your eyes and feeds through nerves back into the circadian clock in your brain, and basically gives it the daytime signal that tells it, hey, it's daytime, it's the time to wake up, it's the time to be active, alert, energetic, and go about your day and do what you need to do to survive, hunt, gather in evolutionary terms, or make money and do whatever you need to do. And then the absence of light, when it gets dark outside, that is also signaled to the circadian clock, hey, it's dark out, it's time to rest, relax, and get into sleep mode. Okay, so that's kind of the fundamental way that the circadian clock in our brain works. Now, the big problem here is in the modern world we now live in, since the invention of electricity a couple hundred years ago, we now have other sources of light in our environment in addition to the sunlight and the sun and firelight. and the stars, right? So that's what it was for millions of years of human evolution. Now, just in the last couple hundred, we've shifted things dramatically. And in particular, the last few generations, where we now have, or the last really just 40 or 50 years, or more like maybe even less than that, 30 or 40 years at the most, where we now have TVs, computers, mobile phones, iPads, all these different electronic devices that are emitting light, street lights, headlamps on cars, indoor lighting in our houses. All of these things, when we use them at night, they create, they basically work in the same way as light from the environment does. They feed into the eyes, into the circadian clock, and they send a daytime signal to your brain. Now, the problem is when you do that at night, when you're sending the signal to your circadian clock, hey, it's the time to be awake, active, alert, energetic, and all that stuff, you're disrupting your 24-hour circadian clock. And you're basically blunting the circadian rhythm. So what I mean by that is, if you think of a good circadian rhythm as kind of a wave, like an undulating of up and down sort of wave with a peak and a valley, basically you want a big peak that says it's the time to be awake, active, alert, and energetic. And then you want a big valley that, you know, strong signaling to your brain saying it's the time to rest, relax, and go into sleep mode. Well, instead of this big peak and valley like that what is what we should have, what we have in the modern world as a result of, first of all, what I just mentioned, light at night, but also, for example, sitting indoors all day and not being outdoors in bright light, but being in dim light all day, combine to flatten out the curve. So we don't have a strong daytime signal, and we have too much light at night, which is flattening out the curve. So instead of this big peak and valley, it kind of flattens out, and it's more like that. The result of that is we have basically less energy during the day when we should have it, and too much at night when we shouldn't have it. We're not getting into rest and relaxation and sleep mode as effectively as we should be. So the end result is the circadian clock regulates all kinds of different hormones in our body that regulate our mood, our energy, our physical and mental performance, our metabolism, our hunger levels. All of these different things are controlled or impacted by the circadian rhythm. And so basically, when you screw up your circadian rhythm, you screw up all of those different hormonal systems of the body, and fatigue is a natural result of that. So example, and there's many, I mean, we could talk for several hours on this subject alone, but that's just one example of how our modern environment ends up screwing up our energy levels.
Okay, so how can a person overcome this fatigue? What are some things that they can do?
Well, there's really two big keys to enhancing your energy levels and overcoming fatigue. So one is what I call cellular regeneration. And, you know, we just talked about circadian rhythm and sleep, and circadian rhythm and sleep are actually, that's a huge aspect of cellular regeneration habits. Okay. So that's one of the two keys to overcoming fatigue and increasing your energy. You have to have really strong cellular regeneration habits. The second part of this is what I call building the cellular engine. And so at the beginning of this, I mentioned that fatigue results when you have an imbalance of energy generation to energy use, the burning of energy. And basically building the cellular engine is saying things that actively build up our body's capacity to produce energy. Not energy in like some sort of mystical woo-woo sense of, you know, spiritual energy or your chakras or your auras or something like that, but your physical energy, your energy at the cellular level. It's a substance ATP, which stands for adenosine triphosphate, and this is produced by the mitochondria in our cells. These are the little things in our cells that are the energy generators. They're collectively, they're like your engine. They're the engine that produces energy in your body. And basically, it's possible to have very small and weak, shriveled up little mitochondria, have a weak little cellular engine, in other words, that produces, you can liken it to, let's say, like a lawnmower engine or something like that, that's a few horsepower. And it's also possible to have a big V8 engine that's supercharged with 500 horsepower, right? So that is dependent on whether or not you're doing the things that build up your mitochondria, which is your energy generation capacity. So those two keys. So, to go with what we've already talked about, circadian rhythm and sleep, it's a critical part of cellular regeneration habits. To give you a couple practical tips on how to actually start to fix your circadian rhythm. Number one is you want to actually create a strong signal for the circadian rhythm in the morning. And the way to do that is bright light exposure within the first hour after waking up. It's very, very important that you get it at a certain intensity of light and at a certain timing. And that timing has to be also very consistent from day to day. You don't want to have, bright light exposure at, let's say, 6 a.m. one day, and then 8:30 a.m. one day, and then, next day, and 10 a.m. the next day. If you think about that in terms of travel, so we all know that if we go from, let's say California to New York, or New York to London, or something like that, we travel to a new time zone. Jet lag, right? Jet lag is the circadian rhythm being disrupted. So we've actually all felt the effects of circadian rhythm disruption. Most of us just don't realize what is actually causing it. And we don't realize that most of us are actually suffering from a mild circadian rhythm disruption, a mild jet lag, in other words, pretty much all the time. And guess what that does? It creates fatigue, it disrupts brain performance, physical performance, disrupts your mood, throws off everything, but it's happening on a subtle level. And most of us don't realize that it's happening because we haven't traveled to a new time zone. We don't really understand why that's happening. We just think that's the normal way we feel. We can feel a lot better if you start to be consistent with your circadian rhythm habits. So morning light exposure at a certain time in the morning, and be really consistent with that from day to day. So if it's 7:30, then make it 7:30 and get that bright light exposure at the same time every day. That's how you entrain your circadian clock, and all the hormones that it regulates, including energy regulation hormones, metabolism hormones. That's how you train it you train your physiology to be awake and active and energetic at that time. Okay, so that's number one. And in order to get that bright light exposure, there's a couple ways to do it. The best way is just to get outside and get morning sunlight in your eyes. Okay, and that can just be you don't have to look directly into the sun, but just the blue sky. Hopefully it's blue, but even if it's overcast, that will be enough to set circadian rhythm. And if you don't have the ability to do that, certain people don't, for one of a couple, maybe a couple reasons. One is that maybe sometimes people wake up at, let's say, 4:30 or 5 in the morning before sunrise. So that's one potential thing. Another one would just be they live in a place that's very dark, or just they don't have time, or something like that. And if that's the case, what you can do is you can get a bright light device. And they make certain devices they're originally intended to treat seasonal affective disorder, which, by the way, is basically circadian rhythm disruption. It's people who have depression and sadness as a result of, and lethargy as a result of disruptions in their circadian rhythm from not getting that morning bright light exposure. So you can get one of those devices, use it for 20 or 30 minutes in the morning, again, at a specific time, consistent from day to day. And you can use it, while you're doing other things, while you're putting on your makeup, while you're reading, drinking your coffee, eating breakfast, so it doesn't have to take 20 or 30 minutes separately. So that's number one, create a strong daytime signal for your brain, for your circadian clock at a specific time every day. Number two is minimize or eliminate artificial light at night. So the way to do that, there's a few different aspects of this. So I mentioned some of the light sources that we have at night are from our electronic devices, our computers, our TVs, tablets, phones, as well as indoor lighting in our houses, street lights, car lights, and so on. So in general, if we're in our house, the best ways to minimize or eliminate the light exposure are, number one, ideally get blue blockers, which are glasses that you wear that are kind of amber colored, and they block blue light. And the reason that's important is it's specifically the spectrum of blue light. So for example, think like a blue sky. That's actually blue light entering your eyes. So it's specifically those wavelengths of light that actually set the circadian clock in the brain. So by blocking blue light, by wearing those glasses, you can actually still use a computer or phone, a TV, and not have your circadian rhythm disrupted as a result of doing that. So very nice. I like that. I think you have to speak so that people will see you.
Yeah. So yeah, I've heard you say that before, Ari, and I put these on. Do you recommend a couple hours before your bedtime?
Yes.
When the sun goes down?
Yes. And those are the.
I live in Minneapolis, so there's a lot of So there's a lot of darkness.
Yeah. So those are the stylish ones, and there's kind of a trade-off with those because they look better. They're kind of cooler glasses than the ones I wear. I'd run and show you the ones I wear, but they're like across the house. So the downside of those is that they're not like transparent. So if you're like trying to hang out with your wife or husband or friends or something like that, they can't really see into your eyes, and it's a little weird to wear sunglasses at night. The ones I wear are like you can see through them much easier, but they're at the same time they're kind of goofy looking glasses. They look like almost like construction worker glasses. So not ideal in that sense. And this is, it's one of the things, it's kind of odd either way you look at it to wear glasses at night in your house. And that's one thing, but it's also, it sucks to have a chronically disrupted circadian rhythm and be tired all the time. So, which is the lesser evil there. So other ways to do this are download Flux on your computer. It's a free software that will modulate the amount of blue light coming from your computer screen. It's spelled F.lux, and you can download it free. So depending on what kind of phone you have, the new Apple iPhones have night shift mode, which is designed for this purpose to minimize circadian rhythm disruption. And then the Android phones, you can get an app called Twilight, which basically does the same thing as Flux does on your computer. Beyond that, the other things that I would strongly recommend are, what was I going to say? Indoor lighting. So wherever you spend time in your house at night, change out a couple light bulbs in the lamps in that room. Okay, so you want to think dim lighting, and it should be either orange or red, amber, orange, or red in color. So get the actual light bulbs that are either amber or red colored light bulbs, and turn off your normal bright white room lighting in that room, and just have one or two lamps that you turn on that have either amber or red light, and have that be the only light source at that time. So get rid of all the bright stuff, create only dim amber or red colored light. Another natural way of doing this, you can use just candlelight, which is a little bit more work, but is really excellent, and it also creates a nicer. So that's one thing, especially in your bedroom and bathroom. It's really, really important to do that. One of the worst things you can do is kind of wind down for 2 hours and then go into your bedroom and then turn on bright lights, or go into your bedroom, the bathroom at night, and turn on bright lights, shining into your face as you're brushing your teeth or taking a shower, something like that. That's really not a good thing. Or doing it in the middle of the night if you wake up to go to the bathroom or something like that, to turn on bright lights. Circadian rhythm. So the last thing that's important to do is blackout shades in your room. So you want to create complete darkness in your bedroom. Get rid of all the little lights from electronic devices, from clocks, from TVs, from any little blinking light outside your room, from street lights and neighbor house lights and things like that. You want to block it all out, so that if you put your hand in front of your face like this while you're laying in bed in your room, you shouldn't be able to see your hand. That's how dark it should be. So you want it to be like a cave in your room, just almost basically complete darkness. The darker it is, the better. And if you do all of those things I just mentioned consistently, that's one important layer of cellular regeneration habits. By optimizing your circadian rhythm, you're going to sleep deeper. And it turns out that one of the most important things that happens while we sleep is our cells actually regenerate their energy stores. Are chronically living with circadian rhythm disruption and poor sleep, result of circadian rhythm disruption, you are chronically under regenerating your cellular energy stores. So you're basically going into each new day without being fully replenished in terms of your cellular energy. So if you think back to what I was telling you about, that imbalance between cellular regeneration and cellular energy use, well, this is just one aspect of the fact that we're not generating our supply of energy very well, and we're kind of living on under chronically low levels of energy. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And I forget, Ari, how much knowledge you have and how much cutting edge information you always have for everyone.
So the other side of the equation here, the other key to cellular energy is, or energy in general, I should say, is building the cellular engine. So I've given you one of the cornerstone habits of cellular regeneration. Now this other part of the equation is building the cellular engine. Okay, and before we get into that, I just want to step back for a moment. And I gave you this analogy of the waveform with circadian rhythm wanting a big peak and a big valley before. Well, if we think about cellular regeneration and building the cellular engine, we actually kind of want to do the same thing here. So basically what we want to do is we want to create certain stresses on the system of our body to be able to build up that cellular engine, to have more mitochondria, stronger, bigger mitochondria to produce more energy. And then we also want to be resting and regenerating and rejuvenating very, very efficiently and intensely, especially each night while we sleep. So we want kind of this big undulation between the two. And the bigger the undulation between the two, the more you're stimulating your cellular engine, and the more you're regenerating very effectively. The more that you're in that, the better your energy is going to be. Now, on the other hand, if you think about what most people do, most people are what I call flatliners. which means they don't do either of these things very well. They don't do the things, and we're going to talk about what these things are. They don't do the things that build the cellular engine, and they don't do the things that are necessary to go into deep, powerful cellular regeneration. And I just gave you an example of that with circadian rhythm and sleep. So by flatlining on that, by not having a big undulation between the two and just kind of doing a flat line, your energy levels are going to suffer. If you're constantly in kind of go mode and you're never giving your body a break and you're not doing things that your mitochondria need to stimulate energy, to generate energy properly, basically you are going to end up a stressed, fatigued, probably overweight, not very healthy person. So this, what I'm going over, we're talking about it in the context of energy, but it's really critical to every aspect of health, longevity, prevention of disease, everything. So cellular regeneration is in place. The other key is building the cellular engine. And in order to understand what that is, you need to understand a concept called hormesis. And hormesis is basically creating a short-term metabolic stressor that stimulates your body to adapt to it. And by stimulating your body to adapt and grow stronger, makes you healthier and more energetic and prevents disease and helps you live longer. Okay. Now, if that seems like a kind of an abstract idea, consider the fact that you're actually familiar with this idea than you realize. Exercise is actually a form of hormesis. So the reason that we have all these thousands of studies showing that physical exercise, helps prevent heart disease and helps prevent brain diseases and has so-and-so effect on longevity and decreases mortality from basically every kind of disease and cause known to man, decreases rates of cancer, and on and on and on. Why we have this mountain of scientific evidence showing it's so beneficial is it's not because exercise is intrinsically healthy, where like the more you do of it, the healthier you become. It's actually only healthy when it's done in the right amounts, in kind of a Goldilocks zone. And if you do it in the right amounts, then it stimulates your body to adapt to that stressor. And exercise is a stressor. It stimulates your body to adapt and grow stronger. And so it does certain things like make your heart stronger. It stimulates more blood vessels to develop, to deliver blood and oxygen and nutrients to your muscles. It stimulates improvements in lung health. It stimulates growth of mitochondria, so the cellular energy generators. And that's really the key thing. So exercise is a wonderfully important and powerful thing. Now, what most people don't realize is there are actually lots and lots of other types of hormetic stressors that do a lot of the same things that exercise does. And to give you a couple of examples of this, and again, kind of going back to the fact that our modern world is kind of wired for us not to do the things that are necessary for us to be energetic and healthy. We now live mostly indoor lives, separate from the outdoors, separate from the elements, and we live in climate-controlled environments that are often kept very, very comfortable. We program our thermostats to be somewhere in the neighborhood of, let's say, 68 to 73 degrees, and that's where we feel comfortable, in this really narrow band of temperature. Outside of that, if it starts to get above 80 or starts to get below 65, we start to feel uncomfortable and it becomes unpleasant. Then we walk over to the thermostat and adjust it to make ourselves more comfortable. Well, the principle of hormesis is that being uncomfortable is actually good for you. And there's a nice quote from Nietzsche that kind of sums up this idea very nicely. He said, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." And that's really what hormesis is. And now it doesn't need to be quite so extreme that you're doing something that's on the verge of killing you, but make yourself slightly uncomfortable in various ways. For example, through physical activity. For example, through being a little bit cold or being a little bit hot. Turns out that both of those things, both cold exposure and heat exposure, stimulate a lot of the same molecular pathways in our body that exercise does. And ultimately, they stimulate our mitochondria to grow bigger and stronger. So this is yet another way that our environment dictates our energy levels. And when we protect ourselves from that, when, in the modern world, we live kind of a lifestyle that is like anti-hormesis. We're not doing all of the things that stimulate our mitochondria to grow bigger and stronger and healthier. Most of us live sedentary lifestyles. We don't have to do any physical activity like we used to acquire food or water or things like that. We can live sitting on our butts pretty much all day. And just walk over to our fridge. That might be the most activity that is required of us. Walk over to our fridge and open some ready-made food, or to a vending machine, or drive to a fast food place or something like that. It's possible to exist like that. It never used to be possible to exist and stay alive without moving your body and doing physical activity. It never used to be possible to exist exposed to cold and to heat. Sometimes you were exposed to the elements. We've only had climate controlled indoor environments for a few generations. They haven't been around that long. So humans have existed for basically all of our evolution years, in an outdoor lifestyle, while being regularly exposed to cold and to heat and to sun exposure, and lots of forces of the environment. But in particular, cold and heat are things that have profound effects on our metabolism and work to build up our cellular engine. Now, in the last 10 years in particular, there's a huge body of research that has emerged around both cold exposure and heat exposure. And we're basically rediscovering the benefits. And it's like, you see new studies, cold exposure helps stimulate fat loss and speeds your metabolism, or boosts the conversion of white fat, which is our body fat, into brown fat, which is energy burning fat that works as basically like an internal heater. It's what helps your body stay warm during cold exposure. That it decreases insulin resistance. That it's linked with prevention of obesity and prevention of various other diseases. Heat exposure. So sauna use. There's a huge body of literature that's now emerged that's showing that sauna use is like a performance enhancing drug. That it boosts brain cell formation, that it boosts exercise performance, that it stimulates basically heart and lung and blood adaptations in your body to deliver oxygen to your muscles and to your brain more effectively. That it increases levels of certain beneficial hormones like growth hormone, which helps stimulate fat loss and muscle building. Decreases mortality, that it decreases risk of dying from all kinds of different cardiovascular diseases, atherosclerosis and stroke and heart attacks, as well as from all-cause mortality, from dying of any cause. And there's literally graphs that you can see if you look this up. There's a famous study on the subject that's showing that the more that somebody uses a sauna every week, the more frequently they use it and the longer they stay in, you see a line like this that is like this massive line showing that the more somebody goes into a sauna, the lower their risk of dying from cardiovascular disease or from dying from any cause. And it is a massive, huge correlation. And I'll just tell you, if there was a pharmaceutical drug that showed effects like this, like what a sauna can do for your health, this would be a massive blockbuster drug, like the best-selling drug of all time. It would be hailed as a miracle drug, the most amazing drug ever created. It's the only thing is that does exist. It's just not in the form of a drug from a pharmaceutical company. It's a sauna, and it requires a little effort. It's not as simple as just popping a pill, and it requires a little discomfort, and that's the principle of hormesis. And so when we do those things, and there's a number of other hormetic stressors that I haven't even mentioned. So exercise, heat, cold, altitude is another one. Hypoxia, and that kind of goes with altitude or with exercise. It also can be the result of holding your breath and doing certain breath holding or breathing exercises, like even yoga type breathing practices, intermittent fasting, as well as phytonutrients. So that the chemicals in plants actually, most people don't realize that. They think that they're antioxidants, but new research has actually uncovered that phytochemicals in plants are actually plant toxins. And by doing a little bit of plant toxins, by consuming small amounts of plant toxins, you are actually stressing your body and mimicking a lot of the same pathways that exercise or cold or heat exposure does. And so you're getting a lot of those same benefits. So like I said, we live in an environment where we've progressively stripped out all of these different hormetic stressors from our lives, and we're suffering the consequences. Our mitochondria shrink and shrivel and become weak, and we lose the ability to generate big amounts of energy. If you think of, if you've ever broken a bone, or somebody has ever broken a bone, and they get put in a cast for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, when they get the cast off, all of those muscles are now shriveled up, right? And the reason that happens is because you're not stimulating those muscles, you're not using them. And when you stop using them, they shrink and shrivel up. So we live in an environment now where we're not doing these things that stimulate our mitochondria, these hormetic stressors, and as a result, they shrink, they shrivel, and we lose the ability to generate energy. So those are the two big keys to overcoming fatigue and increasing your energy.
You are such a wealth of knowledge. Ari, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, Ari, we're all out of time. So how can people find you, follow you, get to know you better? We already know you pretty well, but
the best way is to go to my website, theenergyblueprint.com. And once you're there, sign up for a free video training that I have on the subject of enhancing your energy. Go deeper into all of the stuff that I just went over, but also give you a number of other strategies beyond the stuff. And I got, literally 150 other things beyond the strategies that I just told you about. There's a lot of stuff that we can get into, and we can go way deeper, and still a lot of other powerful strategies that you can use to overcome fatigue and increase your energy.
Well, awesome. So it was theenergyblueprint.com. Yep. And are you writing a new book? Did you tell me earlier?
I'm always writing a new book.
Okay.
There's always a new product in the works and a new book in the works. I'm actually working on finishing a couple books right now. A couple shorter books. So yeah, those will be out soon. But all the best stuff is definitely at theenergyblueprint.com, and the free video training there is phenomenal. And tens of thousands of people have already gone through it. There's amazing comments, and people have used the free training to honestly transform their lives. And that free training that I'm giving out is honestly better than a lot of people's paid programs. So definitely, go sign up for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for your time, Ari. I absolutely love the knowledge that you share with everyone. And if you all that are watching loved what Ari had to share with us, please subscribe to the channel here and come back to watch 21 experts talk about how to be naturally beautiful and have optimal wellness. Have a great day.